Don't tell me you invited him to the wedding, a guest whispered as the bride rushed to embrace a homeless man at the church entrance. Several guests averted their eyes, discomfort evident. But moments later, 12 Marines in crisp dress uniforms marched in, formed a perfect line, and saluted the bride in unison. Type, I'm outraged if you believe kindness should never be judged. Sophie Carter began her workday at 4:30 a.m., arriving at Dawn Pastries in San Diego before the morning rush. At 30, she'd spent 6 years as head pastry chef, renowned for her flaky croissants and cinnamon rolls that melted in your mouth. But to her coworkers, Sophie was known for something else, her daily ritual after baking the morning's first batch. Each day, without fail, she wrapped a fresh pastry, poured coffee into a to-go cup, and slipped out the back door to leave them on a bench near the bus stop, along with a handwritten note, wishing you a peaceful day. The recipient was always the simian elderly man with gray hair and a worn coat who never begged or approached customers, just sat quietly on the bench each morning. In 6 years, Sophie never asked his name, and he never offered it. Her coworkers often mocked her behind her back. She's wasting good product, one grumbled. One day he'll take advantage of her, another predicted. 3 months ago, new management took over the bakery. During Sophie's performance review, her supervisor raised concerns. Your personal charity is admirable, he said carefully, but some customers feel uncomfortable. Perhaps you could donate to a proper homeless shelter instead. Sophie nodded politely, but didn't change a thing. She simply arrived 15 minutes earlier, leaving the food before anyone noticed. She thought her routine went unnoticed until a new employee caught her returning from the bench one morning. She's been feeding that guy for years, the employee whispered to a customer, loud enough for Sophie to hear. Every single day. The customer shook her head with pity and judgment. Poor thing, thinking she's making a difference. Sophie pretended not to hear, rolling dough with her usual care. The words stung not because she cared about their opinions, but because they couldn't see what she saw. A human being, not a problem to avoid. Type, so unfair. If you've ever seen good people misunderstood, you're too soft-hearted, her mother had said when Sophie announced her engagement to Daniel, a firefighter who understood her ritual because he had his own ways of helping strangers. Always giving away what you've earned. But Sophie knew giving wasn't about recognition, it was about seeing the invisible people others ignored. She never spoke with the elderly man. Their interactions were limited to brief nods or occasional eye contact. But one rainy December morning, she saw him shivering on the bench. Without hesitation, she placed her own wool scarf beside the usual breakfast. The next day, she found a note written in shaky pencil on her usual napkin. Thank you for seeing me as a person. Sophie kept that note in her wallet, pulling it out when the world felt cold. As her wedding approached, Sophie ordered her cake from Dawn Pastries and invited her co-workers to the ceremony. Daniel teased her about inviting half the neighborhood, but he loved her inclusive nature. 2 days before the wedding, an unmarked letter arrived at the venue, addressed simply to the bride, Sophie Carter. Inside was a card with neatly pinned well wishes and a single line. Tomorrow, I will come not for cake, but to honor a debt. There was no signature, no return address. Sophie wondered if it was from a distant relative or one of Daniel's firefighter colleagues, but the handwriting stirred a faint recognition she couldn't place. On her wedding day, Sophie was a mix of nerves and excitement in the church's bridal room. Through the window, she saw guests arriving, family, friends, co-workers in their finest attire. Then, at the church entrance, she spotted him, the elderly man from the bus stop, wearing a threadbare but pressed suit, his shoes polished despite their wear. His gray hair was neatly combed, and for the first time, Sophie saw his face clearly weathered but dignified. Guests noticed him too. Whispers drifted through the partially open door. Who invited the homeless man? Is he looking for handouts at a wedding? Sophie's heart sank. Ignoring the planned processional and the wedding planner's schedule, she gathered her gown and rushed across the foyer, ignoring gasps and the planner's frantic calls. When she reached the man, she hugged him tightly, tears threatening her makeup. I still remember your eyes, that first time in 2017, she whispered. He smiled, his weathered face softening. I remember every morning you treated me like a human being, he said, his voice stronger than she'd imagined. As Sophie linked her arm with his to escort him inside, the wedding planner approached, confused. "Sophie, the ceremony's about to start. Who is this?" Before Sophie could answer, the sound of vehicles pulling up outside caught everyone's attention. The church doors swung open with precision. "Type, I was wrong, if you've ever misjudged someone." Silence fell as 12 United States Marines in dress blues entered in perfect formation. Their shoes gleamed, their gloves immaculate, their faces solemn. Guests froze mid-conversation. A champagne glass shattered, echoing in the quiet. The lead Marine, a captain with the nameplate Reynolds, stepped forward and saluted Sophie. "On behalf of Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines," he announced, his voice carrying. "We are here to honor the woman who sustained a hero for 6 years." Sophie stood stunned, still holding the elderly man's arm. Murmurs rippled through the guests. Captain Reynolds gestured to the man beside her. "This is Sergeant Thomas Reed, a Marine who saved 9 lives during an ambush in Fallujah in 2004. After losing his family in a car accident in 2016, he chose to vanish from society, never using his military benefits or revealing his identity." The revelation stunned the crowd. Guests who had whispered moments before now stared in disbelief. Another Marine presented Sophie with a shadow box containing a medal and a faded photo of a younger Thomas Reed carrying a bloodied Marine through a war-torn street, with a younger Captain Reynolds in the background. "Sergeant Reed carried me 4 blocks under enemy fire after I took shrapnel in both legs," Reynolds explained, his voice steady but emotional. He returned for 8 more Marines that day, despite his own wounds. His actions earned him the Silver Star, which he never claimed. Reynolds bowed his head. "If not for him, I wouldn't be here. And if not for you, MS. Carter, he might not have survived to see this day." Sophie's tears flowed freely. "I never knew," she whispered, looking at Thomas. "That was the point," Thomas replied softly. "I didn't want to be thanked for my duty. After losing my wife and son, I couldn't bear being seen as a hero when I couldn't save them." He paused, emotion overtaking him. "But you never asked who I was. You just fed me, saw me, left notes that gave me a reason to keep going." The Marines formed an honor guard from the entrance to the altar. Captain Reynolds addressed the guests. "MS. Carter didn't know she was helping a decorated hero. She simply helped a human in need, day after day, without recognition." His gaze lingered on those who had whispered earlier. "In the Corps, we say, never leave a Marine behind." MS. Carter, who never wore a uniform, understood this better than many who do. A bridesmaid, tears streaming, stepped forward. "I work with Sophie. She arrives early to bake extra pastries, paying for the ingredients herself, just to ensure he had fresh food. We teased her for it." Another co-worker added, voice heavy with shame. A guest stood, emotional. "This isn't just a wedding, it's a military honor ceremony." Thomas took Sophie's hands. "I came today to give you my only gift, my presence, my truth, my gratitude. I overheard you mention the wedding to a customer. I hope you don't mind I contacted some old friends." Sophie smiled through tears. "This is the most beautiful wedding gift imaginable." Daniel, the groom, approached and shook Thomas's hand. "Sir, I'd be honored if you'd join our ceremony, maybe walk Sophie down the aisle." Type, "I owe a debt," if you've ever received something enormous from a small action. After their honeymoon, Sophie didn't return to the bakery. Instead, she and Daniel used their wedding gift money to start the Silent Table, a breakfast program for homeless veterans. There were no press releases, just a wooden sign. "Feeding one person feeds a life that might be forgotten." Thomas didn't appear at the Silent Table after the wedding, but monthly postcards arrived from across the country, each with the same message. Every breakfast is a salute. "Thank you, Sophie." Captain Reynolds explained that Thomas was using his VA benefits for medical care and counseling, with the Marines helping him secure housing and reconnect with his military community. On their first anniversary, Sophie and Daniel arrived at the Silent Table to find the 12 Marines waiting, now in civilian clothes, each holding a single flower. "We'll be volunteering here," Captain Reynolds announced. "This honor won't be forgotten." What began as one woman's daily kindness grew into something larger. Veterans across San Diego learned of the Silent Table, a place for a meal without judgment or questions. Sophie framed Thomas's note above the serving counter. Thank you for seeing me as a person. Below it, she added, everyone at this table has a story worth knowing. When a news crew discovered the silent table and requested an interview, Sophie declined, suggesting they speak to the veterans. This isn't about me, she said. It's about seeing the invisible people around us. On tough mornings, when supplies ran low or volunteers didn't show, Sophie recalled her wedding day, the moment 12 Marines saluted her simple act of kindness. It was all the motivation she needed. Daniel understood. As a firefighter, he knew heroism wasn't always dramatic rescues. Sometimes, it was the quiet consistency of showing up, offering kindness without expecting reward. You know, Daniel said one evening as they closed the silent table, when I married you, I got a wife, 12 Marines, and a growing family of veterans. Sophie smiled. The best kind of family, the kind you choose, and the kind that chooses you back. Type, I will live with kindness, if you believe a small meal can save a great soul. Some heroes live grandly only to fade in silence if no one sees their humanity. Some debts require no money, just the dignity of being treated as a person. Sophie didn't need to know Thomas Reed's story. She saw aging eyes, a hungry stomach, someone deserving acknowledgement. Through that small act, a life was preserved, and a unit of Marines was reminded that not every hero wears a medal. Sometimes, the person guarding your freedom is quietly eating breakfast under a bakery awning. The homeless people we pass might be former teachers, nurses, or veterans who carried comrades through gunfire. Their circumstances don't erase who they were or are. Live with kindness, not for recognition, but so one day you might see 12 people bow their heads for something you never thought to celebrate. In a world chasing grand gestures, true heroism lives in the smallest, consistent acts of compassion delivered without an audience.